Hey y'all, how's it going? Well, that's stuck. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, my name is Jason. I'm the next gen pastor here at Lakeland, and if you're wondering why I'm up here, that's really fair. I've been here about 9 weeks, and I've tried really hard to meet all of you. If you're online, I probably haven't met you, but I'm basically up here because this is all next gen, right? Great things are happening. And I know that it's kind of hard to hear from somebody that you don't know. So I want to give you some quick hits about me so you can feel like who's talking to me, all right? So I grew up in Southern Illinois. About 8 years ago, I was married to my wife, Ashton. Grew up in the same church as I did. Somewhere along the lines, we had 2 kids. Not sure how that happened. It's okay. Don't worry, I can teach your kids the right way. And one of them is named Rory. She's about 5 years old. And then one is Landon, who's 6 months old. And that's probably the one section of my talk that she's going to listen to. She said my name, Rory. Right? So we grew up there. Let's see, what else do you want to know about me? My hobbies. I'm super into Disney World. It's a really weird hobby to have, but we love it. We watch the documentaries, read the books about it. I've probably watched The Office like 12 times. Okay, I'm alone in that. That's fine. Thank you. Goodness, I was feeling very insecure. I've watched it 12 times. It's my go-to show, right? And then also, I'm a huge NFL fan. And before you ask me Bears or Packers, I don't care. I'm a Denver Broncos fan, which safely keeps me away from both of y'all. So I'm pretty set in and safe. But I think the real big question is, why did I choose ministry? And I think that really feeds into what we're talking about today with all of Next Gen, right? Because I actually grew up in the church. I was blessed in that way. But when I was 16, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And I left the church angry. I left it mad. I didn't know if God was real, and if he was real, I had a bone to pick with him. I was pretty upset. I walked away for about 2 years while he went through treatment, and then he was declared cancer-free. And you know what I magically did? I showed back up. Having answered none of my questions, having worked through none of my doubts, none of my frustrations, I just walked back in the door, and I expected to be good. 13 days after he was declared cancer-free, he passed away in our living room. And what happened in that moment showed me that the head knowledge I had about God was missing the point. I had missed God by about 18 inches. And I watched that church that I had grown up in, and the only expectation I had of them was that they hated me because I drummed really loudly. And it was not like Lakeland. And they showed up, and instead of saying the things I expected them to say, where were you? Why'd you walk away? What's wrong with you? Instead, they walked in my front door, and they said, how can we help? They walked in my front door, and they said, what do you need? And in that moment, I realized what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to make sure any faith that I had a chance to touch was made real so that when life throws troubles our way, we can stand up to them. So that when life throws troubles away, we're not surprised by it. Our faith isn't tossed by the wind, and instead it has an anchor of something that is real and authentic. And so far, that's worked itself out in youth ministry and Next Gen. So I thank you guys for welcoming me here. We're not going to talk just about family and kids today, but I do know that what we're going to talk about has everything to do with family and kids, because it's just a life situation, right? Because no matter where we're coming from right now in the season of Christmas and New Year's, whether it was a great Christmas or a terrible Christmas, we all kind of feel right now that there is this hope that we can control our destiny. Perhaps more than any other time throughout the year, we can figure out that we can pick our path. That we have New Year's resolutions, we get to start new us, that we get to chase after things that God has put in front of us, and we feel in this week of the year like we matter. Almost whatever happened before is secondary, that we matter now. And we're gonna pick some huge things to chase after, right? We're gonna go after becoming debt-free, maybe being in a better shape, closer to God, maybe healing family relationships that are broken. Maybe we're gonna chase after things like career moves, maybe that home project. We have big, bold things that we wanna go after. But unfortunately, if we're honest, that means we're likely to have big, bold things that we failed at. Things we missed the mark on. I think that's a shame because God puts a spirit in us to change lives, not just our own, but the lives around us. I think God puts a spirit in us that chases those big, bold dreams so that we can make something and show him the glory of it. As a matter of fact, 2 Timothy 1:17 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, of love, and self-discipline. But I think too often, we miss that. And we miss it because we get down on ourselves. We miss it because we don't hit perfect. One of my favorite authors is a guy named John Acuff, and he says the most dangerous day in life change is the day after perfect. It's the day after we have a terrible dinner on our diet. It's the day after we have a fight and we promise we weren't gonna fight with our spouse anymore. It's the day after we spend more money than we expected to. The day after is dangerous, and I think that puts just a dampening of the spirit that God has put in front of us, which is supposed to be chasing great, big, life-changing, bold ideas. So today I want to fix that, at least for this group, at least for Lakeland Church, at least for people watching online. I want to fix that. I don't want to miss 2020 because we shot for big, bold, and didn't pay attention to what actually takes to get there. Because here's my big idea. I'm convinced of this. It's often the small things that nobody sees that result in the big things that everybody wants. It is often the small actions that nobody sees that result in the big life change that everybody wants to get attention for. We've all set out with goals and ideas in mind, and we have all missed them. I think it's because we didn't start small enough. I think it's because we didn't start small enough. I remember when I was in seminary, there was, my department head was named Dr. Bob Kirka. And he worked through me through a lot of my master's program. We really clicked. So I looked up to him a lot. He seemed to know so much about God and the Bible and who God made him to be and who he was in God. And he knew all those things. So one day we were sitting at lunch, and I just kind of asked him, like, how did you become this version of you? And you know what I expected was some episodic movie, television show where he's like, I sold all my stuff. I moved in with monks for 7 years. I definitely didn't watch The Office 12 times. That's what I expected to hear back from him. In that moment, he looked at me and he said, oh, it's simple. And I went, okay, yeah, it's simple, let's go. And he said, I just read the Bible every year. And I went, there it is. I can't possibly do that. Do you know how many episodes of The Office there are? I have stuff to do. And I think he kind of saw the panic in my 20-something-year-old face. And he kind of said, well, think about it. All that is to me is 15 minutes a day, sometimes less, sometimes more. And if I do those things right throughout the year, by the end of the year, I've read the whole Bible. And he had done that 22 times. 22 times, a life spent in devotion of God. And it started not with something huge and unattainable, but it started with something small. And I won't pretend that I got it right every moment after that, but I did know that if I started to give the best of what I had day after day, small bit after small bit, I would have a life that looked like his. So remember, it's often the small things that turn into the big things that everybody wants to have. And it's actually not a new problem for us. We're actually going to look into an Old Testament book called Zechariah, which if you thought we were going to end the year on Zechariah, you're lying. Because none of us did. So we're going to look at Zechariah 4. And we're going to do some context first, because Zechariah was written in about 537 years before Christ. And the people of Israel had been without home and identity for generations. They had been put into exile for a long time. They didn't have their temple, which was considered their generational mark. It had been destroyed for a long time. And they honestly were in a pretty depressed state for a couple generations there, because they felt like they had been a mighty people, that God had done incredible things. And then slowly but surely that faded. But one day God put a big, bold dream into somebody's head, and it changed the game. That guy's name was Zerubbabel. Kids, can you say Zerubbabel? Hey, nailed it. Okay, all the rest of you get passing grades on a curve. All right, so we're going to start in Zechariah 4, where it starts by saying this: it is not by force nor by strength, but by my spirit, says the Lord of heaven's army. We're going to stop there. When we do big, bold things, they better be in God's spirit. If they're in God's spirit, we're going to untap so many things that we won't get if we do it in our own spirit. Because if we're honest, you can do bit by bit incremental improvements in your life. You can fix things a little bit here, you can fix things a little bit there. But for us to make life change, for God to change the people around us, it better be in God's spirit. We pick it back up. It continues and it says, nothing, not even a mighty mountain, will stand in Zerubbabel's way. It will become a level plain before him. Nothing can stop God. And when Zerubbabel sets the final stone of the temple in place, the people will shout, may God bless it, may God bless it. May God bless it, may God bless it. When we get to the places we want to be, when we have the big, bold things that come true, may we shout, God bless it, because he was in it. If 2020 looks the way we want it to, may we shout, may God bless it, because he was in it. It continues, then another message came to me from the Lord. Zerubbabel is the one who laid the foundation of this temple, and he will complete it. then you will know that the Lord of heaven's armies has sent me. Look at this. We have a goal, rebuilding the temple. We have a timeline within the generation of Zerubbabel. But we also have a struggle. Because if you do a little digging into the history, as this temple was being rebuilt, as this temple rose to glory again, people would actually travel in. In the book of Ezra, it says they would travel in to see this thing being raised, to sing of God's glory, to say that it was becoming something new. And when they showed up, they wept, not in joy. They wept because their mighty temple that was supposed to be being fixed, their mighty identity that was supposed to be rising from the ashes, when they walked in, they saw just a few stones standing on each other. They wept because it felt like nothing. They wept because their big, bold vision looked like something that wasn't worth doing. You guys have dreams that you want to chase this year. I know it. We all do. We have things we want to become. They might even be things that were given to you by God. And it's our duty and it's our honor to chase them. But how often has we walked into a goal and then looked at it and said, it's not worth doing because it's not happening? How many times have you gone to the gym 3 or 4 times in a row and then looked at it and said, I've only lost 1 pound, it's not worth going? And that's not a new problem. So our key verse actually comes in verse 10, where it says this: do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see it begin. How many of us end up sitting back feeling depressed because we don't have Instagram endings at the very beginning? Because we don't get to sit back and say, look at everything I did. Guys, I was in marching band all throughout high school. You know the one thing I never wanted people to know I did? Practice. I just wanted people to assume I was naturally gifted at it. That's a funny way of putting it, but it's real. How often do we want to hide our small beginnings because they're not the Instagram endings that we really want? Because we think other people have done it better. Guys, do not despise small beginnings. Do not despise day after day goals. Do not despise the small footsteps you have to get right, because the Lord rejoices. He celebrates to see the work begin. He is thrilled when we begin to change our lives, when we begin to move in a direction that He has put in front of us. He rejoices. He shouts with praise when the work begins, not just when it's done. So John Wooden was UCLA's basketball coach in the 70s, 80s. I don't know, I wasn't born yet, somewhere around there. And I think he won like a bajillion titles in 12 years or something. But he's basically the godfather of modern coaching. He's basically the one that figured out how to get everything in line, and all the great coaches, and even the ones we hate like Bill Belichick, actually all come from this idea of John Wooden. And he tells a story that when he sat back at his very first practice, they didn't run drills, they didn't have physicals, they didn't draw up game plans, they didn't talk, they didn't have a potluck. They sat back, and the very first practice, what Coach Wooden did with his players was show them how to put on their socks and their shoes. Now, these are 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old men. I'm pretty sure they had that down for a while, or they shouldn't be at college. But he had this theory, and he basically said that so much of basketball is running. So much of basketball is running, right? In drills, in practice, in conditioning, in games, it's running. And he had this theory that if you get the socks and the shoes on right, you're not gonna get blisters. And you're gonna be able to run longer. You're gonna be able to jump higher, just like those old Converse commercials. You're gonna be able to do more because you got the shoes and the socks on right. He basically quoted it and said this: it's the little things that are vital. Little things make the big things happen. Remember, our big idea is that it's often the small things that nobody sees that lead to the big things that everybody wants. So I want us to start 2020 not by chasing the big thing, but by chasing the one thing. The one thing that God has put in front of us. There is power in having one thing put in front of us. If you look throughout the Bible, you're going to find dozens or more of people in the Bible that chased after one thing. They had the one thing they knew God had called their heart to. We only have time for a quick 2. But if you look at David, he was known as what? A man after God's own heart. He was determined to be that, and he definitely led astray a couple different times. He definitely missed the boat on being a man after God's own heart. in a couple different ways throughout his life. But he knew his one thing that he was called to was to shape his heart after God's. And in Psalm 27:4, it actually says this: the one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek most, the one thing, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. Throughout his life, what is the one thing he chased? Delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. He gave time to God. To shape his heart after who God made him to be, he devoted his life to giving time over to God. He had his one thing that he chased. So let me start by asking, what's the one thing that you're going to chase? What's the one thing that you're going to chase? And we flip to the New Testament, right? And we look at the Apostle Paul, who was probably the greatest missionary of his generation. He took the church from being a localized moment into an international movement. And he did that from sacrificing, and he struggled. He was stoned and came out alive. He had all these things that went wrong in his life. And he wrote in Philippians 3, his one thing. No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it. I haven't achieved it yet, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press ahead, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. He had his one thing, finishing the race. God had set in motion for him to forget his past, which was ugly, to forget the pain and sorrow of his current status and chase after something that was bigger. And he said, my one thing is going to be leaving all of that junk behind and chasing after more people knowing who Jesus is. Chasing after more people knowing who God is. He decided that all the rest of it was worth it. All the pain, all the things he was leaving behind, they were fine. Because he was chasing his one thing. Because he was after his one thing, all the rest of that became worth it. And again, you can see all types of other Bible characters and stories that they had their one thing that they were chasing. But remember, God doesn't despise small beginnings. He rejoices to see the work begin. So the challenge that I have for us today is actually even to go a level beyond one thing. It's going to be 2020. I want us to focus on something even smaller. I want us to focus on one word. I want you to turn to God. I want you to figure out what the one word is that he has for you this year, or maybe this season, or maybe this stretch of time. Because if God rejoices in the small beginnings, then let's start as small as possible. Let's start with one word that's going to define 2020, one word that's going to define our season of life here. Because if we're honest, words have power. Words can shape the trajectory of our lives. Words can make us who we're meant to be. We could probably pass the microphone around. I promise we won't. We could probably pass the microphone around and we could ask, when was somebody shared a word with you that changed the path of your life? When did somebody say, I see in you? When did somebody say, I know that you can become this thing? When did somebody say you're worth it? When did somebody say you have value? When did somebody say, I know you can do it? See, we look at those things and we know that words have power. So, kids, I don't know how many of you had a favorite kid book, children's book growing up, but have you ever heard of, I can't believe I'm saying this in church service, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom? Every kid's like, yes, I like this guy now. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom is a book that I only recently encountered at 31 years old because I was apparently poorly read as a child. And we sat back with my 5-year-old and my 6-month-old, and we read Chicka Chicka Boom Boom from library maybe a couple months ago. And remember, this is all to show that words have power. But to refresh your memory, I can't believe I'm doing this. A told B, and B told C, I'll meet you at the top of the coconut tree. We, said D, this is why I don't read the books, my wife does. We said D to E, F, G, I'll beat you up to the top of that coconut tree. Chicka chicka boom boom, will there be enough room? Here comes H up the coconut tree, and I and J and tag along K, all on their way up the coconut tree. Chicka chicka boom boom, will there be enough room? Well, if you've read this book before, you know there was enough room. That's not really the point of the story. But chicka chicka boom boom is this weird set of words that has power in my family. It's this weird set of words that has meaning in my family, because a couple months ago when we rented, it's not a video store, and we borrowed that book from the library, checked it out. See, again, I don't read very well. We checked it out, And we read it one night, and what we realized is every time we reached chicka chicka boom boom, which is like 1 billion times in that book, we would scream chicka chicka boom boom, and my then 4-month-old son would just die laughing. Now this is before he really laughed. You can kind of get one of those, and you knew he was laughing at you because he loved you forever. It was one of those moments, but he didn't really respond to tickling yet, but he responded to those words. I mean, if you don't believe me, check it out. He responded to those words. Watch this. That's where he face planted. But chicka chicka boom boom became these 4 set of words that still has power in my house. If you see a good picture of my son, it's because somebody was behind the camera screaming chicka chicka boom boom. If he's upset, if he's crying in the middle of the night, we can literally soothe him by saying chicka chicka boom boom. See, words have power. Words form memories. So I want us to start off 2020 by chasing our one word, by chasing the one thing we know that God has put in front of us, our one word. Now, I wouldn't give you that challenge without giving you some stair steps to climb up it, okay? So I think you can do this in 3 steps. And the good news is, I did this month while I was getting ready for this talk, okay? So get out your notes. We're going to go down this really fast. So I think there are 3 steps to finding the one word that God has for you. And the first step is this: focus on where you are now. It starts with a moment of intellectual honesty, of being very honest about where you're at now and how that makes you feel. Where are you succeeding? Where do you feel happy about what God has done in your life? Where do you feel like you've gained ground? Where do you feel like God is already working? Be honest about that. Write that down even. Where do you feel like you've messed up a little bit? Where do you wish you could go back and rewind and start over again? What do you think that God is calling you to? Be honest about it. And this is a real life audit. So give it time. Give it space. Give it a moment to work through that. Focus on where you're truly at now, because if we're going to let God speak one word into us this year, we better make sure it's right. We better make sure it's honest. We better make sure it's accurate. So step 1 is focus on where you are now. And then step 2 is to turn it to God. Turn that word, turn that honest audit over to God and say, Lord, did I miss anything? And then sit. Say, God, am I missing something? Are you seeing me differently than I am? Do you want to remind me of something right now? Do you want to remind me of who I am? Do you want to remind me of the fact that that thing is forgiven, it's long gone? Do you want to remind me of who you made me to be? God, just sit in that moment. Do all the work, do all the audit, and then turn it over to God and just sit there and be like, okay, is this right? Speak to me. Show me what you have for me. Show me the word that you've picked out. And I'm willing to bet he's going to give you one. Maybe he'll give you 7, but remember, small things. Small things. For the Lord does not despise small beginnings. He rejoices to see the work begin. So be honest with yourself. Turn that over to God, pray, and then wait. And the third step is, once you get a word, is try it on. This is my favorite step, because it means you messed up the other 2, you can try again. It's okay. Small beginnings are worth always chasing. You can do it again. Try it on for a season. Try it on for a couple weeks, couple days, see what it's worth. You know why I like this step the best? It's because honestly, I messed up the first time I went through this. Now I designed this and I messed up on it. I sat down and I was honest about where I was with God. Lots of drive time, lots of praying time. And I sat down and I turned it all over to him. And I said, God, if this is something that's useful to other people, show me what it can be useful to me right now. And I came up that I wanted my word for 2020 to be drive. That's such a man word, right? Like, I want to be driven. I want to be a conqueror. Actually, conqueror was probably on the list, right? Like, I want to chase after huge things. I want to get career, home, life. It's going to be mine, right? I sat down. I'm like, drive is going to be the thing. And I tried that on for about a week, and I was a jerk. And that was not what God wanted for my 2020, was for me to be, can I say jerk? Kids are in the room. I don't know. Sorry. But he didn't want that for me. He wanted me to be something better than that. So I went back to the beginning. I said, okay, God, I missed it. I feel like other people miss it. Good. That was for them, not for me. God, good job. Let's do it again. So I sat down and I was honest with myself. I turned it over to God and I prayed about it. and I tried it on. Actually, I found my word for 2020, or at least for the first season. Let's be honest, it can change. But for 2020, God is calling me to be wise. God is calling me to have wisdom. If you'll notice, that's the opposite of driven. God is calling me to be wise and be calculating and understanding, wise in my relationships. Seek him in the decisions I'm making. Seek him in the things I don't even know that are coming yet. So I tried wise on for a couple weeks. Even up until 5 minutes ago, I was trying wise on. I think it's it. And God is calling me to try wisdom for this year. So in situations where I don't know what to do, you bet I'm gonna go, what is the wise thing, God? Show me. When I'm struggling to make up my mind on something, when I'm struggling to figure out how to handle it, I'm gonna go, God, you called me to be wise this year. What do you want me to be? And your word could be anything. It could be healing. It could be patience. It could be understanding. It could be drive. If it is, I'm jealous. It could be anything. God is calling you to be something. For he did not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but one of power. He gave us a spirit that calls us to change the world around us and to change the people around us and to change ourselves. But we miss it because we go for Instagram endings. I don't want that for us this year. I want us to chase small beginnings. And small beginning after small beginning, small beginning after small beginning, we'll begin to see God change us in a new and different way. You know what's really cool is once you find your word, you can actually spend time going in to the word of God and finding out what else he's already said about your word. Because if he gave you a word, he's probably already said something about it, right? He's not giving you Albuquerque, and you're not going to be able to find that in the Bible. But I found this in Proverbs 19:20. It's my verse for 2020. Get all the advice and instruction you can, so be wise the rest of your life. Find your word. Meditate on it. Focus on it. See what else God has said about it. And like Kate said earlier, if we do that, we're not just going to change ourselves, our families, our marriages, our spouses. We're going to change Lakeland. And Lakeland will become this engine of thousands of people that are moving in the same direction after what God has them chasing, and it can change Walworth County, which then changed the world. That was Jesus' call to the disciples early on. It was start here. He spread all the power through Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth, it's Acts 1:8. And he said it back then to say, start here. Get that right, go here. Get that right, go here. We're going to start here. We're going to make sure we get it right with small beginnings. Because if you remember our big idea of today, it's often the small things that nobody sees that result in the big things that everyone wants to have. We can do this. Let's do it together. Will you guys pray with me? Lord, this is a big undertaking that you're calling us to. You're trying to move us to become something different. And that is exciting and that is thrilling. And we take that excitement and we often shoot too big. We take that thrill and we often set ourselves up for failure. So Lord, I pray against all of that right now. I pray that you would keep us excited, but you would also take this moment to show us what small beginning you're ready to celebrate with us. The small thing that you're ready to put one foot in front of the other so that you can make us entirely different 1 year from now than we are now. Speak clearly. Speak strongly into our lives as we work through this process, Lord. Let us have the strength to be honest with ourselves. Let us have the bravery to be honest with you and pray it back. And then, Lord, let us have the confidence to live out the word that you've called us to in 2020. Let us rejoice in small beginnings as we see them left and right around this building and around these people. We know you have this in store for us. Let us chase it. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey guys, thanks for joining us this morning. If you're in prayer need, or if you have something you just need to turn over to God, or if you need somebody to help you start this process right now, we have a prayer team right over there in that back corner in the prayer section that's ready to help you begin this process, or just turn over whatever has your heart heavy today. For the rest of you guys, there'll be normal service and ministry next week. We would love to see you back then. Thanks for coming. We'll see you guys soon.